He enters the frame like a rumor. No introduction, no explanation, only silence and a steering wheel. In The Driver, 1978, the world doesn't unfold. It contracts. Dialogue is reduced to fragments. Faces barely shift. Names are withheld. Emotions are buried so deep they don't even cast shadows. Walter Hill didn't make a character study, he made a disappearance. The driver isn't a man, he's a function, a shape behind the wheel, a figure built from straight lines and sharp turns. He's not trying to escape, he's trying to not exist in the first place. The film moves with him stripped to bone, built from asphalt and neon reflections. Audiences in 1978 didn't know what to make of it. Critics called it hollow, executives called it broken, but Hill never flinched. He built a story that refused to speak, and in doing so, it said everything. Since then, The Driver has lived many lives. First a failure, then a cult artifact, eventually a blueprint. You see its shadow in Drive, in Thief, in every film where silence becomes gravity. But few remember what it took to create that silence, or what nearly destroyed it. These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about The Driver, from real-life outlaws behind the stunts to audio anomalies buried in the mix, and the moment this film nearly disappeared forever. Fact 1. He wasn't just a stuntman, he was a fugitive once. Precision isn't always born in a studio. Sometimes, it comes from the streets, and not the legal kind. Billy Hickman wasn't your average Hollywood stuntman. Before he ever rolled in front of a camera, he was known in certain underground circles, street racing rings, late-night getaways, near misses that never made it to court. Walter Hill knew this when he brought him on. He didn't want polish, he wanted scars. Many of The Driver's signature stunts, the alley drift, the tight reverse spin, the flick between dumpsters, weren't choreographed. Hickman didn't need instruction. He'd lived them before, in real time, with real consequences. One of the sequences was so specific, it drew attention from local police, who recognized the route. No charges were filed, but the line between reenactment and confession blurred. Hill never commented, neither did Hickman. When your most believable scene mirrors a real crime, is it authenticity, or just someone daring the past to catch up? Fact 2. Every character is a role, not a person. There's no Jack, no Lisa, no name tags, only functions. In The Driver, every character is identified by what they do: the driver, the detective, the player. There are no flashbacks, no arcs, no moments of vulnerability, just motion and opposition. Walter Hill built it that way intentionally. To him, names implied psychology, and psychology got in the way. These characters aren't meant to be understood. They're meant to exist like pieces in a blueprint, precise, emotionless, inevitable. Ryan O'Neal reportedly asked for a background to work with. Hill said no. Don't fill in the gaps, he told him. Just be the gap. The result? A cast of shadows walking through pools of light, never colliding, never connecting. Can we empathize with someone who was never meant to feel real in the first place? Fact 3. The studio nearly buried the movie alive. There's rejection, and then there's strategic erasure. When Hill delivered the final cut of The Driver, the studio went quiet. Executives were baffled. What were they supposed to do with a movie this cold, this slow, this silent? No emotional beats, no music, no arc. They panicked. The solution? Starve it. The release was minimal. The marketing budget was slashed. Some execs lobbied to delay the film indefinitely, quietly move on and let it rot in the vaults. But the film slipped through anyway. While America yawned, France leaned in. Critics called it visionary. Cinephiles drew lines from Hill to Melville. In Europe, The Driver wasn't a misfire, it was a manifesto. And just like that, the film they tried to hide became the film others copied in secret. Was the film ahead of its time, or just too precise for the audience it first met? Fact 4. A chase was shot illegally in broad daylight. In the first major getaway of the film, the driver glides through city streets like he owns them, sliding, weaving, vanishing. What you're seeing isn't just a well-executed action scene. It's evidence of something the crew shouldn't have been doing. Parts of that sequence were shot without permits. No road closures, no extras, just real streets, real traffic, and a stunt team operating on instinct. The production had a few lookouts and a plan to bail if police showed up. That was it. The alley drift, especially, was done in one pass. A single chance. No permission, no safety net. Some members of the crew referred to it as urban theft. Not of property, but of time and space. When asked years later about the ethics, Hill only said, "It was worth it. You can't fake that kind of panic." When does realism become risk? And at what point does a perfect shot come at the cost of control? Fact 5. Ryan O'Neal was the last resort. He wasn't the plan. He wasn't even in the top 2. Walter Hill first wanted Steve McQueen, the king of car chases. But McQueen passed, unwilling to repeat Bullitt. Then came Charles Bronson, tough, unreadable, ideal on paper. But Bronson demanded rewrites, emotional depth, a character arc. Hill declined. Ryan O'Neal was next, a clean-cut star known for romance, not reclusion. Executives were hesitant. So was Hill. But O'Neal surprised everyone. He didn't try to play the driver, he emptied himself instead. No emotion, no explanation, just precision. The result? A performance so neutral it became eerie and unforgettable. Can casting the wrong actor reveal the coldest truth that sometimes presence means removing everything human? Fact: 6 Europe understood what America ignored. In the US, the driver was a whisper lost in a noisy year. But in France, it was heard loud and clear. Critics hailed it as a spiritual successor to Melville's Le Samurai. The stillness, the anonymity, the codes of movement, all of it felt familiar, deliberate. Cahiers du Cinéma called it a geometry of intent. French viewers didn't demand backstory. They didn't ask for meaning. They read it as cinema reduced to essence: man, machine, motion, silence. While American audiences looked for motive, Europe embraced the lack of it. In Paris, the film played in double features with noir classics. In academic circles, it sparked essays on existentialism and urban alienation. Hill never changed a frame, but halfway across the world, the film changed shape. Does a story need to be understood by everyone or just the right few at the right time? Fact 7. The music score was killed in post-production. There was supposed to be a soundtrack: tense strings, pulsing synths, the kind of score that holds your hand and tells you when to feel. It was composed, recorded, even mixed into a few early cuts, but Hill hated it. To him, music didn't enhance this film, it contaminated it. He argued that silence was part of the narrative, that engines, footsteps, and tire friction were the only music the driver needed. Executives disagreed. Test audiences didn't. The version with the score felt safer. The one without it felt sharper, more exposed. Hill won. The entire score was shelved, the composer removed from the credits. The soundscape remained bare, unforgiving, surgical. And what was supposed to fix the movie became the very thing that would have broken it. Is silence just a missing element, or sometimes the most deliberate sound of all? Fact 8. The detective's interrogation methods were legally real. That unsettling scene where the detective manipulates a suspect into believing he's trapped, that wasn't fiction, it was procedure. Hill consulted with real LAPD detectives when shaping the character. Many of the psychological tactics, false binary choices, passive threats, framing guilt through implication, were actually used in the field during the 1,970 seconds. Some of them, shortly after the film's release, were deemed unconstitutional. The film didn't exaggerate. If anything, it toned things down. What makes the scenes disturbing isn't their fiction. It's how much they feel like paperwork. If realism makes us uncomfortable, does that mean it's working? Or revealing something we'd rather not face? Fact 9. The female lead was meant to be a void. Before Roni Blackley, the role of the player was offered to Isabelle Adjani, one of France's most enigmatic stars. She read the script, took a meeting, walked away. Her reason? The woman doesn't exist. She watches. That's all. She wasn't wrong. The player has almost no lines. She's never explained. She isn't romanticized, challenged, or even given purpose. She's a presence, a mirror. And that was intentional. Hill didn't want a love interest. He wanted another shadow, someone whose stillness amplified the driver's own absence. Blakely leaned into that concept. Her portrayal is cold, unreadable, and unforgettable. Adjani called it a ghost beside a ghost. Is emptiness on screen always a flaw, or can it be the most haunting choice of all? Fact 10. This film was used to train real police officers. You wouldn't expect a crime thriller about a nameless getaway driver to show up in a police academy, but it did. In the early 1,980 seconds, a few California training programs unofficially screened chase scenes from the driver during driving instruction. They weren't studying dialogue. They were studying geometry, turn radiuses, momentum control, urban navigation under stress. Instructors pointed to the driver's stillness as a model of focus. One reportedly said, "He drives like he doesn't exist. That's the goal." The practice didn't last. Once word got out, departments distanced themselves. A film that romanticizes evasion doesn't look great in a training manual. But for a moment, a character who was built to vanish became the blueprint for how to pursue. Can fiction be used to teach real-world discipline? Or does it inevitably blur into imitation? Fact 11. The driver's unblinking stare was a director's command. Watch the driver closely, and you'll notice something uncanny. He barely blinks. That wasn't a quirk. It was a demand. Walter Hill instructed Ryan O'Neal to suppress involuntary movement to hold eye contact without softening. The effect was dehumanizing, not robotic, but predatory. At first, it caused problems. O'Neal blinked too much. Takes were ruined. Eventually, Hill began building entire shots around holding that cold stare. The cinematographer called it the absence of a soul, perfectly lit. By mid-production, O'Neal stopped asking questions about the character. He simply stopped blinking on screen and between takes. When you stare long enough without emotion, does the performance become the person? Fact 12. Nobody in this film changes. And that's the point. Most stories hinge on transformation. Heroes evolve. Villains fall. Lessons are learned. Not here. From beginning to end, the driver remains motion without emotion. The detective stays obsessed. The player never opens up. No one grows. No one arcs. They simply collide, separate, and repeat. Hill built the film like a loop, not a journey. He wanted characters who were locked into themselves. Fixed roles, unmoving. This frustrated some critics, who mistook the stillness for laziness. But others saw something more chilling, a world where identity isn't fluid, it's assigned. And in that rigidity, the film becomes less about who these people are, and more about what they were designed to do. If no one in a story evolves, does it reveal emptiness or brutal truth about how some people never change? Fact 13. There's one attempt at humor, and it's terrifyingly empty. Buried in the middle of all the silence, there's a moment that feels off. A detective, worn out and annoyed, mutters, "Maybe we should call a psychic." No one laughs. The scene doesn't cut. The silence just grows colder. It's the only attempt at levity in the entire film. It lands like a glitch, a fragment of a different genre, intruding and dying quietly. Hill didn't plan the line. It was improvised, but he kept it. Not because it was funny, but because it wasn't. It exposed the void around it, a breath in a room full of still bodies. The silence that follows is more powerful than the line itself, because for a second, it reminds you how far removed these characters are from normalcy. Can one misplaced sentence break a film's logic or reinforce how little room there is for humanity in its world? Fact 14. The most risky stunt was done once, no safety net. The alley drift sharp, narrow, impossibly timed looks rehearsed. It wasn't. That shot was captured on the first try. No blocking, no backup car, no standby medics. The alley was discovered late in scouting. Hickman, the stunt driver, said he could make it. Hill trusted him. The crew arrived before dawn. Traffic wasn't officially cleared. One camera, one take, one sliver of daylight between steel and concrete. The car grazed a dumpster. That scrape you hear? It's real. The fender clipped the edge by less than an inch. No one cheered. They just waited to see if anyone had stopped breathing. Is a perfect shot worth gambling someone's life, even if it makes the scene unforgettable? Fact 15. There's a sound in this film that no one can explain. It happens in the garage right before the driver makes a tight maneuver around concrete columns. A hum. Deep. Low. Just below hearing range. It doesn't match the engine. It doesn't align with the environment. And it wasn't listed in the sound log. One of the post-production editors later called it a tension layer. Not music, not noise, just a frequency designed to be felt, not heard. Some say it was intentional. Others claim it was a glitch that Hill kept because of how it felt. Whatever it is, it lingers. It amplifies the silence, warps the space, distorts time. You don't notice it until it's gone. And when you rewatch the scene, you're no longer watching. You're listening for something that shouldn't be there. Can sound manipulate you without your consent? And if so, how much of what you feel is really yours? Fact 16. The most forgettable car became cinema's most haunting getaway vehicle. The driver's car doesn't look fast or threatening. It doesn't even look memorable. That was never the intention until it became the point. The original car meant for filming, a muscular Dodge Charger, suffered a mechanical failure just before production. Left with few options, the crew sourced a 1974 Chevrolet Impala from a rental fleet, beige, generic, invisible. Hill looked at it and said, "This is the car." Why? Because it didn't draw attention, it didn't scream style, it disappeared. And in a film about a man with no name, no past, and no future, that was exactly what he needed. Ironically, that forgettable silhouette became iconic, not because of its design, but because of what it refused to be. Can something become unforgettable precisely because no one was meant to notice it? Fact 17. This movie was once used as a getaway blueprint. In a courtroom in New Jersey, the driver was introduced as evidence not for inspiration, but for imitation. The defendant was a former valet turned getaway driver in a string of robberies. When asked how he planned his routes, he cited the driver. He even owned a VHS copy labeled Training. Prosecutors found maps, notes, and timing breakdowns that mirrored sequences in the film. One page had a quote from the movie scribbled at the top: "If you do it right, they don't remember you." Though the court didn't blame the film directly, the implication lingered that fiction had bled into reality with clinical precision. When art becomes instruction, do we still call it storytelling? Or something else entirely? Fact 18. The ending was written in stone and never touched. In Hollywood, multiple endings are standard: happy, sad, ambiguous, tested, reshuffled, reshot. The driver had one, only one, and it never changed. Walter Hill refused to write alternate versions. He didn't want the story to land. He wanted it to vanish. No resolution, no emotional crescendo, just a moment, quiet, unresolved, then gone. Studio executives begged for options. They were told no. The editor later said, "We didn't even prepare another cut. There wasn't a what if. There was only what is." That final stillness wasn't by accident. It was the final act of control. Does a story without closure betray the audience or free them from needing answers at all? Fact 19. The final scene was filmed in a room full of silence. Not quiet, not low volume. Actual silence, intentional and absolute. Walter Hill wanted the last scene of the driver to feel like something had stopped breathing, so he demanded silence on set, no talking, no movement, no cues. Lights were prepped in advance. The actors were given no last-minute direction. They simply walked in and existed. The camera rolled. No one said a word. Crew members later described the atmosphere as funeral-like. Some said it felt like filming inside a vacuum. Even the usual ambient sounds, feet shuffling, cables being dragged, were missing, and that silence bled into the frame. The scene didn't just play quiet, it felt vacant. No epilogue, no closure, just a look and then nothing. Can silence be more final than death? And is that why this ending still echoes decades later? Fact 20. Even the actor never really understood the driver. Ryan O'Neal delivered a performance defined by restraint, stillness, emptiness. But off camera, he was looking for something, anything to hold on to. He asked for character notes, a name, a reason. Walter Hill refused. "He's not a man," Hill said. "He's momentum." O'Neal tried to find depth on his own. Eventually he stopped. He began showing up to set already distant. He didn't warm up, he didn't speak much. The performance wasn't built, it was surrendered. Years later, O'Neal admitted he never figured out who the driver was. "Maybe that's what made it work," he said. "I was as lost as the audience. And maybe that's why the driver is unforgettable, not because of who he was, but because he never gave you a chance to find out." Is the absence of identity a weakness, or the very thing that turns a character into myth? Bonus fact: the film almost ceased to exist, not by choice, but by clerical error. In the late 1980 seconds, the driver came closer to being erased than most people realize. Not by design, not by censorship, but by an administrative slip. 20th Century Fox was conducting a standard archive purge. Old reels, unused negatives, redundant stock. One box, mislabeled "test footage non-essential," was set for destruction. Inside it, the original negatives of the driver. No one noticed. No one double-checked. Until, by sheer luck, a junior archivist reviewing materials for a restoration project opened the case and recognized the slate marks. Production dates matched. Scene numbers aligned. The purge was paused with hours to spare. No headlines, no formal apology, just a quiet correction. A near erasure, narrowly avoided. The irony wasn't lost on those who knew. A film about a man trying to disappear had nearly disappeared itself, not with drama, but with paperwork. How many other films have already vanished like that? How many stories are gone because no one was watching? Does something need to be remembered to matter, or is the threat of being forgotten what gives it meaning at all? The driver never asked for attention. It avoided it. No name, no score, no explanation, just momentum and the space it left behind. It was almost lost, almost forgotten, but here we are, still chasing it decades later, trying to define something built to vanish. So tell us, was this film a masterpiece misunderstood, or a puzzle that was never meant to be solved? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let us know which forgotten film you want us to break down next.